I'm Mario Ritter with the VOA Special English Economics Report. Today we continue our report on the group of chemical elements known as rare earth metals. These are mined from the earth and used to make technology, from mobile phones to missiles. The United States once led the world in rare earths. Today, China controls almost all production. Premier Wen Jiabao says China will not use these metals as a diplomatic weapon. But Japan says exports meant for that country have remained at Chinese ports as a result of a recent dispute. The United States stopped mining rare earths in 2002. Companies blamed environmental rules and low-priced imports from China. But now, exploration is moving forward again. Edward Cowell is president and chief executive of a company called U.S. Rare Earths. He and his partners gained rights to some land in the American West about 15 years ago. They had been interested in thorium, a radioactive element that can fuel nuclear reactors, but not be processed into weapons. Mr. Cowell later found that the land also held a lot of rare earth metals, lately a subject of intense interest. The company has not started mining yet. It still has to get permits and work with other businesses to put operations in place. Ed Cowell says a lot of work remains. He says the earliest that they could open the mine would be in 6 to 7 years. Another American company is Moly Corp. Jim Sims, the public affairs director, says Moly Corp has already begun producing 3,000 tons of rare earths a year. That makes the United States the world's second largest producer, a distant second. Mr. Sims says Moly Corp is the Western Hemisphere's only producer of rare earth products. The company says the largest reserves of rare earths outside of China are in its mine in Mountain Pass, California, and in the Mount Weld area of Australia. Jim Sims says Moly Corp spends only about 10% on mining. The big cost is in chemically separating the rare earths from the minerals that carry them. He says Moly Corp raised about $380 million when it sold stock to the public for the first time in July. The company aims to increase production to 20,000 tons by 2012. It says that would more than meet current levels of demand in the United States. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. The United Nations is warning that the world is not prepared to deal with the fast growth of cities. The World Economic and Social Survey 2013 calls for new ways to meet the needs of city populations. More than 6.5 billion people are expected to be living in cities by 2050. Most new city dwellers will be in developing countries. The United Nations says the effect on limited resources in many countries will be huge. The World Economic and Social Survey notes the increasing demands for energy, water, sanitation, public services, education, and healthcare. The world population is expected to rise to more than 9 billion by 2050. 2/3 of all people are expected to live in cities. The United Nations says about 80% of this growing urban population will be found in Africa and Asia. The report says sustainable development of urban areas requires coordination and investments to deal with important issues. These include land use, food security, job creation, and transportation. William Vandergeest is with the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. He says cities need to work closely with rural communities so that food supplies can be secured and the environment can be protected. The report also examines the problem of food insecurity, which affects hundreds of millions of people around the world. 1 in 8 people is still chronically undernourished. The Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development, Shamshad Akhtar, says world food production will have to increase by 70%. That increase will be needed to feed the additional 2.3 billion people expected on the planet by the middle of the century. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. A look at some industries in the United States shows that the economic recovery is uneven and growth seems to be slowing down. We spoke with experts in the transportation industry, which is easily affected by economic changes. Economists say trucks carry nearly 70% of the freight or goods transported in the United States. The American Trucking Association represents the interests of the trucking industry. It says freight is a good measure of the economy. This is because businesses have to move unprocessed materials, carry parts to factories, and transport imports and exports. Bob Costello is the chief economist for the group. He says the trucking industry is a leading economic indicator. That means that it helps signal what will happen in the economy. He says it is a good sign if the amount of goods carried by trucks increases, and the amount of freight carried by trucks is going up slowly. The American Trucking Association says total freight tonnage increased in June, but remained unchanged in July. That is good news to Bob Costello. He says it tells him that the economy is not falling into another recession. Other information about economic growth comes from air freight, or goods transported by air. Recent reports show demand for air freight fell more than 3% around the world during July. Perry Flint is with the International Air Transport Association. That group represents about 240 airline companies worldwide. It gathers information about air passenger travel and air freight. It says international air freight decreased in July from the same period the year before. But other signs show increases. The same report shows that passenger traffic increased over 3% from last year. That may be why a top official of Cambria Suites Hotels says all travel, not just business travel, is strong. Michael Murphy says, "We are seeing the highest demand in the history of the hotel industry right now." Conflicting economic signs have made it difficult for economists to predict future growth. For example, government experts first said the American economy expanded at a yearly rate of 1.5% from April to June. But they amended that value as new information became available and showed growth was higher, more likely at a rate of 1.7%. Changes like that have made it harder for many people to see the road ahead. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. In December, President Obama told some of the nation's top bankers that they need to explore every responsible way to make more loans. The president said, "America's banks received extraordinary assistance from American taxpayers to rebuild their industry. And now that they're back on their feet, we expect extraordinary commitment from them to help rebuild the economy." Major banks have been doing well since the worst of the financial crisis shook Wall Street more than a year ago. Banks including Bank of America, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo have recently announced plans to repay government rescue money. New profits and freedom from the pay limits tied to federal aid mean bankers can again receive big bonuses. But critics say banks are profiting mainly from trading activities, not from making loans to small businesses or homeowners. Britain has placed a 50% tax on bonuses for bankers. There have been calls for similar measures in the United States. Unemployment rates are the highest in a generation, 10% nationally in November. An estimated 17% of the labor force either lacks a job or is not working enough to pay all the bills. The weak job market has not only hurt spending, it also puts pressure on homeowners who are struggling to pay their mortgage loans. Record numbers have been told that they could lose their homes. Banks are expected to have sent almost 4 million foreclosure notices in 2009. The administration has had limited success with its promise of $75 billion to help struggling homeowners. The Making Home Affordable program aims to prevent up to 4 million foreclosures. The idea is to get banks to reduce monthly payments, but fewer than 32,000 loans have been permanently changed so far. Lenders are unwilling to change loans that they suspect will fail anyway. An estimated 1/4 of homeowners owe more than their home is worth. That situation increases the risk that a loan will not be repaid. Experts say progress in the housing market will be limited until the job market gets better. Most new jobs in the United States are created by small businesses. But small businesses have been hit hard by the recession and now the difficulty in getting loans. And that's the VOA Special English Economics Report. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. The United States government says Apple and 5 book publishers illegally fixed prices of ebooks. 3 publishers, Hachette, HarperCollins, and Simon & Schuster, agreed to a settlement announced April 11th with the Justice Department. The agreement says they must repay millions of dollars and stop giving Apple special treatment. Attorney General Eric Holder said the department will continue to take legal action against Apple and 2 additional leading publishers, Macmillan and Penguin. He says Apple and the publishers conspired to increase the prices that consumers pay for ebooks. He said the Justice Department wants to make sure Americans can buy ebooks at a fair price. The department says Apple and the 5 publishers made an illegal deal to set higher prices for electronic books. Because of this, it says, Americans paid millions of dollars more than they should have. The dispute centers on the influence of Amazon.com. The internet store had been selling ebooks for $9.99. But the government says Apple made a deal with the publishers 2 years ago as it prepared to launch the iPad tablet computer. The deal guaranteed Apple 30% of the money earned on each ebook sold. It also created a pricing model that required stores to sell at a price set by the publishers and Apple. The price was several dollars higher than the one offered by Amazon. Acting Assistant Attorney General Sheris Posen said when companies get together and conspire to enter into agreements that eliminate price competition, it crosses the line. This kind of agreement is illegal and anti-competitive, she said. She added that company officials, including former Apple chief Steve Jobs, knew what they were doing at the time. The Justice Department case involves antitrust laws, which aim to halt business methods that crush competition. 16 states and Puerto Rico are also bringing their own case. Apple and British publishers Macmillan and Penguin have decided to go to court rather than settle with the Justice Department. Apple says the accusation made against it in the department's lawsuit on April 11th is simply not true. It says the launch of the iBookstore in 2010 supported competition and broke what it called Amazon's monopolistic grip on the publishing industry. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. For more business news and other stories for people learning English, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. In late November, an American congressional committee failed to agree how to cut the federal budget deficit by $1.2 trillion over 10 years. The co-chairs of the Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction said, "We have come to the conclusion today that it will not be possible to make any bipartisan agreement available to the public before the committee's deadline." The 12-member committee was created under the Budget Control Act of 2011. The group was equally divided between Democrats and Republicans. The goal was to find acceptable ways to cut federal deficits. Now,
without an agreement, that will fall to involuntary cuts through the act of sequestration. The budgetary terms sequester and sequestration mean that the Treasury Department will withhold or cancel a set amount of spending. By law, equal cuts in both civilian and military spending will begin in 2013. A total of $1.2 trillion needs to be cut. This is in addition to cuts of about $900 billion required by the budget law that created the Congressional Supercommittee. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta has warned the combination of cuts could hurt his department. If the sequester goes into effect and it doubles the number of cuts, then it will truly devastate our national defense. This has made some lawmakers feel uneasy. Representative Howard McKeon of California opposes new cuts in military spending. National defense has contributed enough to deficit reduction. Many lawmakers are concerned that with elections next year, programs important to voters in their areas will be cut. That would add to increasing voter anger over what they consider a lack of action by lawmakers. President Obama has warned Congress that he will block any efforts to cancel the spending cuts. Already, some in Congress are trying to undo these automatic spending cuts. My message is simple. No, I will veto any effort to get rid of those automatic spending cuts. Experts say that Congress and the Obama administration could still reach agreement on budget cuts and taxes before the sequestration takes effect. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Special English is VOA's daily source of news and information for people learning English. You can read, listen, and learn with texts, MP3s, and podcasts at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also get English lessons 3 times a day, Monday through Friday, at the VOA Learning English page on Facebook.